This story, The Shadows of Winter Hollow. The year was 1931, deep in the heart of a remote village called Winter Hollow, nestled in the snow-covered hills of Montana. The village was small, isolated from the world, and known for its bone-chilling winters and superstitions whispered by its few inhabitants. Margaret Walker, a widowed mother of 4, had carved out a humble but proud existence. After her husband's tragic death, she refused to remarry, determined to raise her children alone. Margaret was one of the village women who worked odd jobs to support their families. Every morning before dawn, she would join her neighbors to walk to the worksite. It was a routine she knew well. But that winter, something felt different. One evening, Margaret's employer announced a change in plans. A new site for work had been arranged on the far side of the woods. The women agreed to meet early the next morning, and Mary Harper, Margaret's closest friend, offered to walk her to the new location. "I'll be at your door at 5 a.m. sharp," Mary said with a reassuring smile. That night, the snowstorm raged fiercely, blanketing the village in a thick layer of white. Margaret tucked her children into bed and prayed for their safety before retiring for the night. At exactly 5 a.m., a knock echoed through the quiet house. Margaret, bundled in her heavy coat and scarf, opened the door to find Mary waiting, her face pale in the gray pre-dawn light. Without a word, Margaret stepped out, closing the door quietly behind her. The snow was deep, and the world was eerily silent. Margaret followed Mary closely, stepping into her friend's footprints to avoid sinking into the snow. At first, everything seemed normal, but as they walked further, Margaret noticed something strange. Mary's footprints were growing larger. At first, she dismissed it as her imagination, but the further they went, the more the prints seemed wrong. They weren't just larger, the shape was changing. What started as the neat impressions of boots had become grotesque, claw-like marks that sank unnaturally deep into the snow. Margaret's heart pounded, but she kept walking, too afraid to stop. She watched Mary's silhouette ahead of her. Her gait seemed slightly off, her shoulders hunched in an unnatural way. The uneasy silence was broken only by the crunch of snow under their feet. When Margaret finally summoned the courage to speak, her voice came out shaky. "Mary, are you all right?" Mary didn't answer. Instead, she stopped walking and slowly turned to face Margaret. In the faint light of dawn, Margaret saw the truth. This wasn't Mary. The face staring back at her was twisted, with hollow, glowing eyes and a wide, unnatural grin that revealed sharp, jagged teeth. The creature tilted its head as if mocking her fear. Margaret's body froze in terror, but her instincts screamed at her to run. She turned and bolted, her boots slipping in the snow as she sprinted back toward her house. She didn't dare look back, even as she heard the heavy, thudding footsteps behind her, louder and faster than any human could make. When she finally reached her door, she flung it open, slammed it shut, and locked it, pressing her back against the wood as she gasped for air. She could still hear the crunch of snow outside, the sound growing fainter until it disappeared entirely. As she tried to steady her breathing, another knock came at the door. Her blood ran cold. Summoning her courage, she peeked through the small crack of the window. It was Mary, her real Mary. "Margaret, where have you been?" Mary asked, her voice filled with worry. "I've been standing here for ages. You never came out." Margaret's hands shook as she opened the door. Through tears, she told Mary everything. Mary's face grew pale as she listened. When Margaret finished, Mary grabbed her arm. "You were lucky," she whispered. "There are things in these woods, things that wait for the snow to fall. They mimic us, but they're not us. If you had followed it any further, you might never have returned." Margaret never left the house at dawn again, and though she prayed for peace, strange things continued to happen in Winter Hollow that winter. Some nights, she would hear knocking at her door, But when she looked outside, there was no one there. Other villagers spoke of shadowy figures and unnatural tracks in the snow. And as the years passed, the story of Winter Hollow became one of those tales that mothers told their children to keep them from wandering too far on cold winter nights. But Margaret knew the truth. Some things in the dark are not meant to be understood.